All right.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to the fifth episode of my podcast. There will be movie reviews. I'm your host, Ryan Holmes, and with me today is a very special guest. He's actually been in a couple feature films. Those include a movie called Driven, starring Sylvester Stallone, and Cinderella Man. And this guy is my uncle. And Uncle Robbie, why don't you introduce yourself to everyone?
I'm Uncle Robbie. You guys can call me Rob, though, but it's great to be on the podcast, Ryan. I've enjoyed listening, and I'm honored to be a guest today. I'm looking forward to this.
Awesome. Yeah. So what movie will we be discussing today?
Well, we're going to be taking a look today at one of my favorite all-time movies, and that is Forrest Gump. Forrest Gump. So, a little known fact about this, Ryan. I don't want to, I don't want to certainly take the reins away early on, but I
No
do want
worries.
to
Yeah.
preface the discussion by letting you know that there's only two movies that I've seen in the theater 5 times, and this is one of those movies.
What's the
So
other one?
I don't know that I should broadcast that, but it rhymes with Schmitanic.
Oh.
Yeah, I saw that in the I
I
like
see.
I think that, well, I guess we'll get to this, but I think that I like epic movies. I like long epic movies that you can sit down with a
Yeah.
big thing of popcorn, and I think both those movies kind of fall into that category.
100%.
But yeah, I'm a big fan of Forrest Gump.
Yeah. So you saw Forrest Gump in 1994, I guess. How old were you when you saw that? How old were you?
Well, I guess I was in high school still. I probably was about 17, I guess 17 or so when
Hmm.
when Forrest Gump came out. And yeah, I mean, I don't have individual memories from those different trips to the theater,
Yeah.
but I do remember that I couldn't get enough of it, and I really like just there's so many moments in the film that I look forward to. It just kept bringing me back, and
Yeah.
for me, I think movies are very much about escape, and so I found that I could completely disengage and get lost in that world of Forrest Gump for 2.5 hours.
That's totally true. I couldn't agree more.
Mm.
It's a pretty incredible film that just it takes you on that journey through the life of Forrest Gump, and it's a very entertaining journey that he goes through. So many things go on through with Forrest Gump. He just has so many experiences that are crazy, and you want to be a part of it as much as possible, and you would love to be in that world too, which is so amazing that the director Robert Zemeckis does, and even Tom Hanks does, is just makes that experience for you so entertaining. But if you
Yeah,
want to talk, just to give a little, I'll give a little brief introduction to this film to
sure.
recap of for the audience members. So Forrest Gump came out in 1994. It's directed
Mhm.
by Robert Zemeckis and written by Eric Roth. It is based on the book of the same name by Winston Groom. And this movie was just it obviously was huge. It was a
Mhm.
big movie, grossing about $678 million at the box office. And usually dramas don't get that much recognition or money, whereas like superhero movies, and superhero movies weren't really out at that time, but say,
Right.
or action movies like Die Hard of the 90s, and Batman for
Mhm.
another example, were getting all the money. But Forrest Gump, with almost $700 million, that's a lot. That's a pretty big deal. And so this
Mhm.
film stars Tom Hanks, Robin Wright, Sally Field, Gary Sinise, Haley Joel Osment, and McKelty Williamson, who plays Bubba. This film also won 6 Oscars for Best Lead Actor for Tom Hanks, Best Picture, Best Adapted Screenplay, Best Director, Best Film Editing, and Best Visual Effects. And this was the first film ever to win Best Picture and win Best Visual Effects. Because usually films that win Best Visual Effects are, again, the action films, action and adventure, and sci-fi, those movies. But we can get into that more, the visual effects of this film, which are pretty astounding, and they're pretty incredible for that time too. But we'll get into that a little bit. Um, But I think first we got to discuss the great character of Forrest Gump. He is such an iconic character, and I don't know if you want to speak of that a little bit more, but yeah, you can go ahead
Sure.
and just yeah.
Yeah, I mean, Forrest Gump. I think that one of the things that makes him so lovable is it's his innocence, right? Like
Exactly.
he's unaffected by social mores, and he doesn't think about reputation. He doesn't think he's not sort of like so many of us do. We imagine how we're being perceived by other people and we adapt our behavior accordingly. And Forrest
Mhm.
Gump, there's none of that. He just is who he is. And I think that he retained a certain level of innocence from the time he was a child, and he brought
Yeah.
that right through into adulthood. So now he finds himself in these adult situations, but still retains that innocence, and that's not something that we get to see very often. And I think that in the movie they account for his IQ at something like 74.
It was like
So
yeah, it
he
was 75 or 78, one of
75,
those. Yeah,
yeah,
something like
in the
that. Yeah.
70s.
Yeah.
So he was obviously, he's a functional he's a functional adult, but you're not going to be, talking about the issues in the Middle East, or the best way to roll out a vaccine, for that matter, to keep it topical with Forrest Gump.
Exactly.
I think that he kind of just goes with the flow, and I've sometimes wondered if that the feather at the very beginning and the end of the scene is symbolic of kind of who Forrest Gump is. He just sort of rides the waves, right? He kind of goes where circumstances take him, and deals with things as they come up, but
Yeah, totally.
always with hilarious results, and often very, very heartwarming results as well.
Yeah, another thing, I think his character is very, very. He's simple. He's a
Hmm.
simple-minded person, and he looks at what I noticed when I was watching. Is he kind of looks at the beautiful things in the world. He always has these quotes from his mom. He's like
Right.
telling about my mama. My always says life is like a box of chocolates. My own
Yeah.
always told me that miracles happen every day. Some people don't
Hmm.
think so, but they do, and
Yep.
he uses those to enforce people instead where most people, they don't talk about their mama telling their like explaining their morals in life and how to be a decent human being. You do that in a way just by being yourself and not explaining it just by actions instead of saying words as what Forrest Gump does. He tells people about why
Yeah.
how to be and how why he is himself and why he acts the way he does. um
Yeah.
Another thing with the feather, I think you're bang on with that. Like it also talks about more of the film as like life is full of uncontrollable events, I think. And
Hmm.
in innocence is lighter than air, and some things are a
Mm.
result of luck. He goes through so much chaos and like fun events in his life. And I think, yeah, exactly. And that's the beauty of life too, is just you'll never know what's about to come next. And
Hmm.
that's what's pretty amazing about Forrest Gump and his character too.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. And he doesn't reflect on any of it. Like well, not, he doesn't reflect. I don't say he doesn't reflect, because he's a contemplative person in spite of his, let's say, intellectual limitations. He learns, and he shares lessons throughout the movie. But
Hmm.
at the same time, like even at the end of the movie, when Jenny is showing him the scrapbook of him as he ran across America for three and a
Hmm.
half years, or over 3 years.
Yeah.
And she's like, I kept your clips, and this is the time you were on the cover of this magazine and Runner's World. And all he's doing is just staring at her the whole time, because it's his Jenny, and he doesn't get caught up on his accomplishment. He doesn't even recognize his accomplishments as
Yeah.
accomplishments. They are
No.
just things, and he's just going with the flow. He's going like the feather. He's just going with it, and he doesn't get hung up on any of it, which allows him just to continue that journey and with of random events. Whereas
It,
I think many of us would be very contemplative and think we'd rest on our laurels, we would celebrate, and that's just not part of Forrest Gump is.
Exactly. It's when another example in the film is when he's running, he just wants to run, and people believe it's like this
Yeah,
insane thing, like he's the like what is he thinking? Like why is he doing this? He's changing people's lives even though it's so simple of what he's doing, but it's hilarious how people are looking at him and seeing like incredible this man is for doing this and running, and there's a guy that comes up to him while he's running. He says like, "You've changed my life, I got
right.
my life back together because of you." And he also another thing is he helps people create these ridiculous ideas, the the bumper sticker, like shit happens, he like helps
Yeah, that's
with
great.
that. And then the smile shirt, he helps a guy
Yeah,
create that. And
have a nice
that's
day. Yeah.
it's hilarious. Yeah.
It is great, and that same guy, I think it's the same character that is the first person to start running with him. That says, Forrest Gump, I'll follow you anywhere. And then at the very
Hmm.
end, he turns around, and again, he doesn't do it for any reason except for he felt like running, and that's what he says
Yeah.
multiple times. And then at the end, he turns around, he's like, "Oh, I'm pretty tired now. I think I'm gonna go home," and
Yeah.
just starts walking back. And that same guy was like, "What the hell are we supposed to do now?" Like, because they're trying to find all this other meaning in it that just Forrest Gump is not. He just felt like running. I just
Yeah.
love the simplicity. I love the simplicity of the act, and the sort of juxtaposition with all of these followers trying to find this deep meaning in something that it just isn't there.
Yeah, exactly.
You know.
I think a character that really helps Forrest kind of express his maybe not his true self, but another side of him, I think, is Jenny. And
Mm,
Jenny realizes, she knows Forrest is very, very simple, and she understands that he is not the smartest. And there's a quote when that she doesn't want to marry him
mm,
because of herself too. And Forrest asks her, and he says this great line. He says, "I'm not a smart man, but I know what love is." And I
mm.
think that that's another thing about Forrest is he's such a lovable and loving character. He loves
Mm.
everyone. He's never the only person I really think he's rude to is that guy that the people that are
Oh,
like abusive to Jenny,
yeah, of
that
course.
are rude to her.
Right.
And everyone he treats with respect, and that's something that people thrive off of, and are absorbed off of his character, I think. And
Mhm.
even Bubba Gump and Gary Sinise's character, Lieutenant Dan, is
Mhm.
also he's able to absorb that respect, and that Forrest Forrest emulates throughout the entire film. At
Mhm.
the beginning, Lieutenant Dan is very, very strict, rude, and but Forrest helps him through that, which is and helps him become a more calm, humble person. And eventually, he ends up marrying or being engaged to what I assume is like Vietnamese woman. And
Mhm.
that's kind of he obviously changes his character entirely, and
Mhm.
Forrest Gump is able to do that, I think, and it's pretty amazing.
Yeah, I mean, you're right about, he doesn't even when Lieutenant Dan wasn't all that kind to him, he doesn't judge people, with the exception of the folks that caused Jenny some kind of harm as well. Are you picking up the dog barking in the background, or are you is that okay?
Uh,
Just
I
a
can't really hear it, no, but
Okay.
I can
All
take that
right.
out, and
All
I'll edit
right.
this
Good
part
stuff.
out too.
Yeah. So, but I think that, yeah, I think that his default is he doesn't judge people. And even when Lieutenant Dan was being not all that kind to him, he recognizes Lieutenant Dan as someone that is special and important to him. And so, and
Totally.
that persistence, like of that non-judgmental persistence, eventually wins Lieutenant Dan over. But I think what makes the character kind of endearing is that a lot of us, we sort of mix emotion with rational thought, and we try to think things through and use sense, you be sensible and whatnot. but he is very Forrest Gump is very much driven by emotion, and I think that it's brought home
Mhm.
by that line
Totally.
that you mentioned. I'm not a smart man, but I know what love is. His emotional intelligence, I don't think there's that much wrong with that.
Yeah,
Maybe
totally.
his book smarts are not there, but
Yeah.
he experiences all the same human emotions that we all do, and we see that multiple times throughout the movie.
Yeah, totally.
Mhm.
100%. His character it's been iconic for several years, and I'm sure it will be iconic for another 100 years. It's pretty
Yeah.
he's known throughout everything, and it's such a quotable film too, with is
Yeah.
he's that's another thing is the great script that Eric Roth adapted from the book is, you know, it has these great lines throughout the entire film that people have been quoting for
Yeah.
decades. It's like
Yeah.
it's
That's a
pretty
good point.
amazing. Yeah.
I think for a lot of people, and I remember I remember pretty clearly when it came out. I think it was very obvious to everyone that this was a blockbuster, like right,
Mhm.
and a movie that had an enduring quality, like right from the beginning. I think it was recognized as that. But
Yeah.
to your point, about like all the references made, I think that it was very nostalgic for several generations. Around the time that it came out, there were multiple, whether it be my generation, my parents, or even my grandparents, there were things that they could find in that movie that brought them back and made them nostalgic. And to see it through Forrest Gump's lens
Yeah.
was just kind of it was fun to revisit. I think a lot of that stuff.
Even for me as a person that's born 10 years after the movie came out, and I'm 50, I'm like tons of stuff in the film is like from generations before me, and even seeing even seeing Forrest Gump meet John F. Kennedy and saying,
Yeah.
"I gotta pee," is it's hilarious. And
Yeah.
obviously, I knew who John F. Kennedy was when I saw that movie as being,
Sure.
a very very popular and influential president,
Yeah.
and also for being a history buff too, and all into American, politics in that way.
Hmm.
I remember seeing that and just thinking that was so neat, and how they did that, and that
Yeah.
it goes along with the visual effects with the film too, I think, which are pretty endearing. And I think we should talk about the visual effects in the film because it's actually a pretty big important piece of it. A lot of the stuff that makes the film so great is
Hmm.
due to the visual effects in the film, which are
Yeah.
incredible. Yeah.
That
um
that was
Go
certainly
ahead.
the
Yeah.
big story when it came out. It was the ability to like to see JFK interact in a it's not like they just they did take some stock footage obviously, but they
Yeah.
didn't just put different words in his mouth. They actually reworked his mouth so that he could say
Yeah.
what he needed to say. But that at the time, I know today by today's standards, that's really not that big a deal. But at the time, it was really cutting edge and it was really exciting. Like, oh my God, how did they do that? And we all knew Gary Sinise, like everybody knew Gary Sinise from of Mice and Men and all kinds of other movies. But now, like to see Gary, to see the way that it was done at that time, now Gary Sinise has no legs for half the movie. That at the time was a big deal. It wasn't easy to do that effectively
Yeah.
up until 1994 or so.
Yeah,
Yeah.
there's some really important, like, big deal things about that. There's little small details that they have in that. There's a scene where he's moving his legs across the floor after the New Year's Eve night
Right.
with the two
Party with
girls.
the
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah. And there's a CGI table that they had put in there. And
Okay.
so because what they would do is they put the blue covered all over on his on past his knees,
Hmm.
and they do that and use that as a green screen, or they'd be able to digital oh my god,
Yeah.
digited oh my god, I can't even say it.
Digitally
Yeah,
remaster,
yeah.
digitally, yeah,
And they'd be able to change it that way, and so they added in that CGI table. And so when he moved his legs, you would think, oh, how did they do that?
yeah,
Because there's a table there. How would he able to move? His legs would just be
yeah,
hitting the table. So what they did is they just added a CGI table in to make it look Oh my God, that's so interesting. How could they do that?
Right.
Are his legs gone or what's going on? And that's just a
Yeah.
great small detail. And I think that's one of the reasons why it won that Best Visual Effects award at the Oscars. Um,
Yeah, that was a great one. Yeah, that whole what they did with Lieutenant Dan was pretty amazing throughout the movie. But of course, I mean, we see their efforts towards those special visual effects with every presidential encounter that Forrest Gump
yeah,
has throughout the movie. Like there's just, it was always fun to see a unique take on it. Was it Nixon that wanted to see his or Johnson? I can't remember, that
Lyndon B. Johnson
wanted to see his $1 million wound
yeah,
and he's but yeah, and JFK all the way through. That's part of what made it so much fun. You were kind of looking forward to seeing what the next presidential encounter was going to be like.
yeah.
So
And then he talks to Richard Nixon and he kind of plays along with history too. He messes around with the Watergate scandal.
mm-hmm.
And he's able to, when he's in the, he talks to Richard Nixon about, and Richard Nixon tells him, "Oh no, we have a great hotel around
Yeah,
here that you
I have a
should
much
stay
much
in.
nicer place.
Yeah,
Yeah.
not much nicer place." And even in the scene after, he Forrest Gump calls, I guess the front desk, I assume, and
Mm.
says, "I think there's people flashing all these lights in a room close to me, and it's giving me trouble sleeping." And it's, obviously that's a part of the Watergate scandal with Richard Nixon too, and it's hilarious. It,
Yeah, I remember finding out that the actual name of the guy that picks up the phone I was like, is it Frank Mills, or I can't remember
Frank
whose name is.
Wills, that's what
Frank
it is.
Wills,
Yeah,
right? Who was the security guard
yeah.
that actually sort of blew the cover on or discovered the whole thing. And so I think that's another thing that makes the movie so special is those attention to detail, like, and finding those little Easter eggs that you find if you're paying attention that make it multi-layered and kind of keep you coming back.
Yeah, and there's tons of that in there. Even at the first, I think, scene where it's like from the perspective of a news camera or news broadcasting is when the African American woman is going into the school.
Oh yeah.
And and Forrest Gump, she drops her books. Forrest Gump comes in the middle of it and he gives her books, obviously again with that simplicity of him. He's never a racist. He has,
Isn't that no, that concepts like that are well beyond,
yeah,
beyond him.
exactly. And so he picks up the book and he looks at the camera and waves to everyone. And then at the beginning, what even makes it better is you see the whole scenario going down. And you just see Forrest Gump's head pop out, like out of the crowd, looking at like what's going on in here, what's going on.
Yeah.
And I die
Yeah.
laughing because his character is also quite comedic too. He is quite
Oh,
a comedic character. Yeah.
well, that kind of like it sort of brings you back or brings me back to a common debate about Forrest Gump, which is which type of movie is it? Like, so because you're right that I guess it was classified technically as a drama,
Hmm.
but I mean, the comedic value is super high. There's action. It's a romance story. Like so it's hard to calling it a drama kind of, I think, boxes it in a little bit.
Hmm.
But it just has so many, and again, I think that's part of the appeal because it takes you on this journey and you really experience everything from sadness and joy and love and disgust, and like it's all there in the
That's
movie.
100%. That's so true. Even I notice when I'm watching, say, the scene where he's in the war, when he's in Vietnam, I feel like I'm watching a completely different movie
Right.
than Forrest Gump. With they have that great soundtrack too, where they have like all along the watchtower
Yeah.
and playing that long
Yeah.
cool woman and by the Hollies, and they
Oh,
just got a
big time.
ton of great music in that too, a great soundtrack that is. And that's another thing about the film is they got that incredible soundtrack. There's almost always a song from that
Yeah.
generation or time playing over
It
it while
was
while the acting is going on. Yeah.
it was perfect. I mean, I had the soundtrack to it when that movie came out. It came out as a double CD,
Yeah.
so back then, so it was a big thick case, and but that Man, I remember going to our cottage like many times, and just in the 90s, and that was like it regularly in my CD changer was the soundtrack to Forrest Gump, because it's such a great cross section
Exactly.
of rock and roll, and in the way that it's used as well. Like for example, right after, I think it's just after Jenny, when she was contemplating jumping off that building,
Yeah.
and the guy that she's with is passed out. I think he's high and passed out on the bed, and she gathers up her stuff, and right as she opens the sliding door and exits, it's the Doors playing, like as you
Freebird.
walking out the, well, no, for you're
Oh,
right, Leonard, Freebird was playing while she was up on there,
oh,
which made me fall in love with that song. Like
yeah.
that scene was so like epic, and like whoa, and like just with the guitar and the chorus and everything was
Yeah.
awesome. But
Totally.
later when she's walking out on the guy, they time it with the Doors. It's the lover baby, what your Kristen would be very upset, because I'm sure she could name that song in a second. But right as she's exiting, it's like as you're walking out the door, and she's walking out the door. Like they just sort of weave it all together perfectly. So
And also, yeah, exactly. Same with the song Freebird. It has to do. She wants to, like, she talks about having, now she wants to fly away at the beginning of
mhm.
the film too, and so that perfectly
Yeah, that's
captures that
right.
entire thing with the song. Her entire emotion, and she also, when after she Forrest saves her from the strip club after she's getting
Yeah,
heckled and water tossed on her, she like looks out onto the off the bridge, and she says just like, don't you wish you could just fly away, saying something like
yeah.
along the lines of that. And that's another part of her character. She just wants to fly away from uh
Yeah, do you think
that
I could
whole,
fly off this bridge?
yeah.
And then at the very end of the movie, they kind of bring it full circle, and as Forrest is walking away from her newly dug grave, all the birds fly into their tree at the very end. It's like
Oh,
it's kind of I don't know, it brings the flight and the birds like one more time back, where they all come to Jenny's, like to their tree right above Jenny's grave. So yeah, it
that's,
was
yeah,
kind of
that's interesting. That's really
yeah.
cool. Yeah, totally. There's a whole bunch of, again, with the, I was before, as we were talking about the sequences, where the entire film theme, I guess, can be changed, with those little sequences, when he's in the war, and also when he's say as a child, it's completely different, those two whole ideas. There's even like that little kind of section where he's a football star. It reminds you of some like Gene Hackman movie or something, as a
Yeah.
head coach, or
Right. Hoosiers.
or like
Yeah.
Remember the Titans. It was like
Right.
that,
Right.
exactly. And Robert Zemeckis, again, a very very popular director, is
Hmm.
good at doing that type of action, especially with Back to the Future,
Oh
and
yeah. It's the
yeah,
best.
films like that. And he also, yeah, Castaway he directed too. And
Yeah, he's done a bunch with Tom Hanks, eh? They've got a
yeah,
pretty long, even what was it, Polar Express, I think, is a
yeah,
Bob Zemeckis
yep,
film, which of course
yeah,
he's the conductor or the engineer.
yeah,
Yeah.
100%.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's pretty, he does a great job at emulating that emotion through, music is a big part of
Yes.
it, and visual
Huge.
effects, set is great. But
Hmm.
yeah, I think that's just a pretty important part of the film. I think is those little pieces that he's able to add, and I think that's what the reason they won Best Picture. And I don't know,
Hmm.
when it came out,
Hmm.
was it a very different film than what you've seen before, or was it, because it could be similar to other films in a way, but like when you saw it, have you seen something like this before? Have you seen?
No, I remember it standing out. Like I remember it being and I think again that was sort of the appeal to it. But I think that obviously there's been period pieces, or there's been where we've revisited certain historical events, but having something like that's not a time travel movie of some kind, where you're actually going through and reliving all of these culturally like iconic events,
Mhm.
and done that way with Robert Zemeckis' vision and Tom Hanks' talent, and then mixing in the soundtrack. I mean, there really wasn't anything quite like that. But it was also, I think, at the time when it came out, again, there was this contrast between like if Tom Hanks had just won the best actor Oscar for Philadelphia
Yeah.
the previous year, and so it was really that it was a really interesting contrast to see him playing this character, because we knew Tom Hanks so well, like we know him so well. And sometimes I guess that's one of the marks of a really good actor, is that even though you know them so like entirely well, when you watch De Niro, you're not thinking, oh, I'm watching Robert De Niro. And when you're watching
Yeah.
Tom Hanks, you're not thinking, oh, I'm watching Tom Hanks, I'm watching Forrest Gump. But at the time, like it was fresh off of like Philadelphia, he just won that. It was his first big dramatic role after being a comedic actor for so long.
Yeah.
So it was interesting to see him go back from this very sophisticated, this very sophisticated man in Philadelphia to this, I don't, however you want to, however you want to define him in Forrest Gump. It was unique in many ways, but I think that the experience of the film was somewhat influenced by what we had just seen Tom Hanks do in the past and what he was known for, right?
Yeah, it totally, like when Tom Hanks first started acting, I guess he was in comedic roles, and from what we know him today, he's he's like America's dad, I guess, is known as, like
Mm-hmm.
he's that super nice guy.
Mm-hmm.
Everyone wants to be friends with, obviously, but at the time, I assume he was a big actor, but he was still coming out of the shell. He's still,
I think so.
yeah, I
Yeah,
don't know. I mean, obviously, with Philadelphia, that kind of broke him out even more. But I think the film Big,
yeah,
like
yeah.
completely, that was the movie that really got him started. But he's still, coming out as an actor. He's still,
Yeah, I mean, he still wasn't. I don't think up until Philadelphia. I can't picture him in a non-comedic role, or like I can't think of anything. Like some of my favorite movies from the '80s and early '90s were Tom Hanks movie. The Money Pit is one of my favorite comedies of all
Mhm.
time, starring Tom Hanks. But yeah, and I would at some point, maybe we'll have to, like, if you ever do a podcast on this topic, I'd love to even uncover how he got that role in Philadelphia, because I'm sure there was a lot of other actors that were probably being considered for that role. Like, who would
Yeah,
think of Tom Hanks as being the person that is going to play this, homosexual man dying of AIDS, like at that time, very controversial topics,
yeah,
very heavy topics, and what vision it took to think of Tom Hanks. But all of a sudden he was the biggest A-list actor you could think of, and who better to slide into this role and for Forrest Gump. And I'm trying to remember, you might recall, Ryan, but I know that there was, as with all movies, there was other actors that were considered for that
I do know.
role.
Yeah, there was actually, you probably won't imagine, a lot of comedic actors wanted to
Right,
were up for the role of, or were asked to play Forrest Gump,
right.
and it was Bill Murray was one of
Bill
them,
Murray, yeah,
John
it's hard to imagine.
Travolta,
Oh my
and
gosh, eh?
I think that, I mean, that came in 1994, so that would have been like a pretty risky, because at this time John Travolta wasn't really a big actor.
Yeah, I'm trying to
Except,
think of
I mean,
Pulp
he
Fiction
I
that
mean,
come
he
out.
like
Yeah, but
Pulp Fiction came out the same year, so it would have
right,
been like filming would have been maybe at the same time, so Pulp Fiction wouldn't have came out yet.
yeah,
And then Chevy Chase was
yeah.
another one.
It would
Chevy
have been
Chase,
hard to. It's always hard to go back and picture that, right?
it would have been a completely different film if it's Chevy
Huh.
Chase, and I
A
think
hundred, 100%. And I read somewhere that the author of the book, was it Winston? You mentioned his name at the
Winston
beginning, Winston
Groom.
Winston Groom. I did read the book as well. That's how big a Forrest Gump fan I was.
Yeah.
So I picked up the book and read the book as well. But I read somewhere that he always envisioned John Goodman for the
Yeah.
role.
Yeah, I read that too. And Bill Paxton was also one of
Yeah,
his
Bill Paxton.
first choices for the role. And
Yeah,
maybe I could see maybe Bill Paxton being like, he's a pretty
yeah,
good,
he's
great
pretty
actor.
versatile. Yeah,
But Tom Hanks, I think they got it on the mark there. I think
I think so.
they hit it perfectly. Such an iconic role.
Hmm.
Totally. There's some, yeah, so if you we can take a break though now, and we'll be
Okay,
back in a little bit, so in a few seconds, but
looking forward to it.
All right, welcome back, everyone. Um, Robbie and I think we're gonna start talking about just some of our favorite parts of the film in general. You know, there's tons of memorable scenes that everyone loves and everyone can quote, and there's definitely lots of quotes in this film that are still today. I don't know if you can agree with me. This is probably top five in the top five, probably the most. I don't know what number it is, but it is one of the most quotable films of all time. It is
Yeah,
definitely up there.
no
There,
question.
there are some great quotes in this film. Um, you know, obviously, as I said before, life is like a box of chocolates. You never know what you're gonna get. Oh, stupid
uh,
is a stupid does.
stupid is as
Yeah,
stupid does. I remember being very confused by that one for a while. Like at least when I first heard, I'm like, what exactly is he trying to say when he says
I still don't even
stupid?
know what it means. Yeah,
I think, well, I've come to the conclusion, and there's, there listeners here could be like, you goofs, it's obviously means this, but I think it's more that, usually he would say that anytime somebody insulted him or was mean to, or insulting his intelligence, and he would
yeah,
say, well, stupid is, mom always said stupid is as stupid does. And I think it means that, well, you're only as stupid as the way that you act and what you do. So like you making me, in some ways, you calling me stupid is basically, you're the one that's ignorant,
yeah,
what you're doing. So I think it's kind of like, I think it's basically like that. Stupid is as you're as stupid as what you do. I think that's another way to sort of say it. So
yeah. A hundred
um
percent.
I could be
Yeah.
totally wrong though.
Yeah, no, it's all it's just I bet you there's tons of different like perspectives and ideas of what it might mean. But yeah, no, it's a definitely an idea for sure. That makes sense to me. But
Yeah.
yeah, another quote I love is he goes yeah, from that day on, I was running. And he's got that thick accent in there too, which is it's just hilarious. I love it.
Yeah,
He's so proud. That's the moment where Forrest Gump is actually proud of his running, and he's like, "They was my
that's
magic shoes," or he's like,
That's true.
yeah,
He was really proud. Remember, he's like, yeah, but a lot of people wouldn't believe this, but I can run like the wind. Like he's sort of, there
yeah,
are moments where he's like, he is proud of himself. He
yeah,
takes simple pleasures, right?
yeah,
Like where he's proud of himself. That accent though is, I think, probably what makes a lot of his lines so quotable. And in terms of like my understanding of like how, where he actually got the accent, I think there was some debate on what accent he
that,
was
yeah,
supposed to
exactly.
do and whatnot. And my understanding is that he basically listened to the child actor that played him in the
Yeah,
early scenes of the movie, and that's how that kid actually, like in that movie, in those scenes, like on the bus, and when he's getting his magic legs and all that, that's how that child spoke
yeah,
in real life. And so Tom Hanks kind of listened to him, and he's like, well, I want to carry that forward into adult and into whatever, the adult character. And
yeah.
so it's kind of interesting.
Well, yeah, because in originally Tom Hanks didn't really want to have that thick accent in it, and
Okay.
then Robert Zemeckis, he's like he really wanted him to have that accent, and
Right.
I think another long part of that is he copied the accent off the child actor playing
Mm-hmm.
Forrest Gump too, and he's originally from Alabama too,
Yeah.
and that's where he got that accent. And Forrest Gump or Tom Hanks, what he did is he's just like he just he asked him, he's like, what does your dad do for a living? And he's just like, he makes grace like that. And then he's like, they
Right.
go in all sorts of products. And I heard that on a Graham Norton interview, and I thought that was
Huh.
hilarious. And he just copied it off like that. And
That's great, eh? Because you always imagine that there's some epic, like this resulted in, I don't know, like we did major research and we spoke to a linguistics professor that indicated, but no, it's always something simpler, much simpler than, I heard this guy talk like this and I made a whole character around it.
yeah,
You hear those kinds of
exactly.
things all the time, but yeah, it's pretty cool. But definitely like the accent that he brings to it, I think, is what makes one of the things that makes it so quotable. I don't know that some of the lines would be as memorable if it wasn't said the way that he says it, right? So
Yeah. And not only does Forrest Gump have a lot of quotable lines where he talks about his mama. Mama always said, tons of lines like that. But Jenny has probably one of the most iconic lines that's used like every time somebody runs for something. It's "Run,
Hmm.
Forrest, run."
Yeah,
I've used that so many times as like maybe not as much today, but when I was younger in public school, it's every time somebody's running is just you yell that or something like that. And
totally. I think
it,
that that one clicked into pop culture like really quickly
yeah,
after that movie. I've even used the "that's my boat." Like I've done that. Like we have the boat at the water, obviously, and
yeah,
so I use that sometimes. And after that ridiculous scene where it smashes into the dock, and he's just like,
yeah,
"Oh, that's my boat," and
yeah.
I just love it.
And yeah, another funny thing about Forrest that I love is every photo that he's taken is with his eyes closed. He had every photo that he's in. So like in the magazine with him in where Forrest shows like the lady, you want to see a photo of Lieutenant Dan, and he shows the magazine and Lieutenant Dan's like he's just smiling in the wheelchair and Forrest has his eyes closed
I
completely
never
like
noticed
the
that, but you're right.
yeah.
He always has his eyes closed. Like,
Yeah.
yeah,
I
you're
guess
right.
yeah, well that's just I think a part of his character. He seems like the type of guy that you can't
Would
really
blink
take
when
it.
the
Yeah,
camera.
blink but but
Ah, bright
it's
light and
yeah,
flash.
exactly. And when
Yeah.
there's that giant box cutout of him for the
Oh yeah, for the
ping
ping
pong
pong.
and he's closing his eyes in that too and he's got his eyes closed completely and it's pretty
Yeah,
funny actually.
yeah, it's
And
pretty great.
there yeah, another great line is Lieutenant Dan, you got your magic legs. Something like that. I'm not sure if that's the exactly it, but he says,
Magic
yeah, yeah,
legs.
magic legs. Yeah. And I think that's, yeah, it's awesome. And Lieutenant Dan, so, um, you know, more realistic as a character. He's very sad all the time. And
Yeah,
he's lives in the real world more so.
right,
And he doesn't like, obviously, Forrest, Forrest Gump's life is very, very positive for the most part.
right.
And whereas Lieutenant Dan's isn't. And so he balances that like realisticness with Forrest Gump, and he's just like, I know that you idiot. And it
Oh, that's
says
one of
like,
my favorite lines. I was
yeah.
thinking about that too, Ryan, like earlier, that whole scene. I was thinking about that scene for a few reasons. Number one, it's one of my favorite when he's driving by on the shrimp boat and he sees Lieutenant Dan sitting on on the pier there. And this is a perfect example of how most of us we blend emotion with rational thought and whatnot.
Mhm.
But here he is, he's completely driven by emotion. He sees his friend Lieutenant Dan on the pier and doesn't even jump. He just starts walking and like walks off the boat and like to start to get to Lieutenant Dan, because in that moment all he wants to do is be with his friend. And so
Yeah.
and then he climbs up on the water and he's like, Lieutenant Dan. And Gary Sinise's Lieutenant Dan says, well, I told you if you were ever a shrimp boat captain, I'd be your first mate. So here I am, try out my sea legs. And and Forrest Gump's like, well, you ain't got no legs, Lieutenant Dan. He's like, yes, I know that. It's just like it's those little comments I think that I find even funnier than some of the big punchlines. And that's the case for me in a lot of movies. It's just the delivery of those little lines, like, yes, I know that.
Yeah.
I don't have legs. But yeah.
Yeah.
Anyway, I just there's so many things I like about that scene, and then
Yeah.
after that, and then you forget about it. You're like, what happened to the boat that he jumped off of? Sure enough, it just like
Oh,
plows into
totally.
the dock behind them, and the scene is over. But it's
Yeah.
great how it brings it around.
I
Yeah.
love it's pretty there's just one line or one sequence where again with the where he's training for the war and the drill sergeant, he like Forrest Gump's character
Oh
is
yeah.
really
Yeah.
almost
Yeah.
perfect for the war, as he just does whatever, he takes
Yeah.
everything literally, and he does whatever he's told. He's being
That's
like he's
Well, that's the
the character's
credo too. It's don't think, just do. Don't think it, just do it. And
yeah,
that's what Forrest Gump has been doing his whole life. He doesn't really necessarily think a lot about
yeah.
or contemplate, but he does it. So I think you're right. It's like I think that's what made him such a good soldier is he just did what he was told, and that's what he was good at.
Exactly. And I love that scene where the drill sergeant goes, Gump, what's your sole purpose in this army? And he goes, to do whatever you tell me, drill sergeant. And then the drill sergeant goes, God damn it, Gump. You're a goddamn genius. This is an outstanding answer I've
That's
ever
the
heard.
best answer I've ever
You
heard.
must have a goddamn IQ of 160. You are goddamn gifted, Private Gump.
That's great. I
And
know. Then when he
yeah,
puts the gun together, like super quickly,
yeah.
Private Gump, why did you assemble that gun so fast? Because you told me to, drill sergeant. Jesus Christ, this is a new company record. You're going to be a general someday, Forrest. Private Gump. It's
Yeah,
just so.
exactly. Again, and then he's told again at the beginning of the film that he's an IQ of 75, and then he's told by the drill sergeant, he's like, "You must have a
Yeah,
goddamn IQ of 160." It's kind of a little irony there. It's hilarious. I think it's so funny that
yeah.
whole idea. Yeah.
It's funny, like you always wonder on that movie when you think about his intelligence, about what he thinks about it, and if is he self-aware and whatnot. Because a lot of the movie, he's using those one-liners that Mama gave him to defend himself and to just sort of like, this is obviously what Mama told me to say. But then at the end of the movie, you kind of realize you come to the realization that he is very self-aware about his mental limitations when he meets his son for the first time and asks Jenny. He chokes up, asking, like it's hard for him. You can see the lump in his throat. This great
Hmm.
acting by Tom Hanks, but he's like, is he smart or is he? And then she cuts him off. He's like, he's really smart. He's one of the smartest in his class, and like you can see
Yeah.
and
Oh
it's not.
my. Oh man.
I
Yeah.
I think it's as much pride as it is he's not going to have my son's not going to have to go through what I went through and to be made fun of
Exactly.
and to be put down, like. But it was a really, I don't know, it was a telling scene when you become, yeah, he is self-aware, like he knows his limitations.
That scene for me, that's another really iconic scene. If we're since we're talking about scenes that are really important, I think
Mm-hmm.
that's a very very iconic, and that I tear up a little bit just seeing that and
Mm-hmm.
seeing that you know yeah, he's got that lump in his throat. Say, is he smart? And it's
Mm-hmm.
oh man, it just
Oh,
like
it's
you feel for him, that if I were in the same situation, I'd want my child to be have I wouldn't want him to have any disadvantages in life like the way he
yeah,
did. And
yeah.
he probably wouldn't want him to go through the same childhood that
Mm-hmm.
he had, with the
Yeah,
braces or
exactly.
in dealing with bullying. And but I think,
Yeah.
yeah, exactly. And that's what makes it so emotional for him too.
Yeah, I, I
Definitely.
I I agree with that. It was a really special scene, and like how quickly he falls in love. Like at first when Jenny, since we're diving into the scene, so when Jenny tells him and he starts backing up, he can see he's
Hmm.
overwhelmed with the information, with the
Oh
news.
yeah.
And I think that your first the way that she responds to him is that you don't have to do anything. You haven't done anything wrong. It's like trying to put him at ease, like, hey, don't worry, like it's not, I'm not I'm not going to smack you with child
Hmm.
support or like whatever else. But like you weren't clear about what it was, but he was just overwhelmed with the shock and the happiness of
Yeah.
it, because he said, what do you think? And he's like, I think he's the most beautiful thing I've ever seen. Like it's
Yeah.
yeah, I
It's
get
pretty
emotional thinking
incredible.
about it too. It's pretty it's intense. And I think I honestly, Ryan, I don't know, obviously I watched the movie for this podcast, but I don't know that I'd seen it. I don't know that I'd seen it prior to the birth of my children. And like, so I have a 6 and 3 year old, as you know, and
Yeah.
so, but I don't know if I've watched it in the past 6 years. I've seen it many times, obviously, but
Hmm.
yeah, but I think that whole scene brought new meaning to me, and I could get in his head a little bit more, just well, but that what that connection really means and how overwhelming it can be. So but yeah, no, I like that scene, even though it's getting to the point in the movie where like I know the credits are coming soon and I know the epic story is about to come to a close, but
Yeah.
it's still a really nice scene.
Well, it's a new life, I think, at the end. It's the same. It's that scene at the beginning of the film where he's off to school for the first day, and
Yeah, yeah, that's right.
he experienced with the same bus driver too, and it's a new life.
Dorothy
And
Harris. Yeah.
you like that whole idea of that, his maybe his son's going to go through that incredible journey that Forrest went through, and the story kind of lives on, and that's what is great about the film. You see a new generation of Gumps, I guess, is
Yeah.
going on with his son. And it's also great that Forrest Gump's going to be able to be there to be on that experience with his child too, which is pretty
Yeah.
incredible too.
It is, and it's the happy ending in spite of the sad ending. Like
Mhm.
because it wasn't. I don't know if you call it, if do you call it a happy ending? I'm not sure because like the only thing
I
every
think so.
break, I guess so. Every segue in the movie it comes back to Jenny, and
It's
so
true. Yeah.
it's he did get to marry her. It's sad that he didn't get to spend the rest of his life with her, but
Hmm.
he has this connection through Forrest Jr. that will he'll carry with him the rest of his life. So
I think it is a happy ending. Yeah, I think 100% because
mhm.
I think Jenny's her legacy kind of lives on with Forrest, and she'll be remembered as only for the happiness about her and the great things about her. And
Yep.
that's the good thing about Forrest is he doesn't look at the bad things side of people. He looks at the great part. Even as Jenny is dealing with addiction and abuse.
Hmm.
Forrest finds a way to bring light into her life all the time,
Yeah.
and I think that's what happens at the end of the film is she's finally happy again,
Hmm.
and even though she's dying, she's with the person that she's meant to
Hmm.
be with. And
Hmm.
so is Forrest Gump. He's with the person that he wants to be with, that he's meant to be with, I guess. And he's also with his child too, that has also a little part of it has half of Jenny in her anyway.
Yeah.
So in the child, yeah. And so
Yeah. I
which
think you're
is
right.
yeah, which is that's why I think it's a happy ending, even though she does die, which is obviously very, very emotional and sad. I think
Hmm.
that the fact that there's a new they were happy together in the end, seeing each other not far away from each other is that's
You're
good about
right.
it. Yeah.
Even though she died, we got closure on that
Hmm.
that storyline. Like we wanted them to get together, and we wanted Jenny to stop screwing around and like doing like being with the wrong people and all
Hmm.
this stuff. And like we wanted it to happen, even if we thought that maybe it's not realistic, but in the end we did get that,
Hmm.
and yeah, he was the I don't know. She had this. The two lives were so opposite, like between Jenny and Forrest. And I guess that's part of the why the movie and the relationship is interesting, because they're leading these completely opposite lives in so many ways. And
Yeah.
I know there's some debate about like every analysis of every movie, some people try to find politics in it, and is
I
there
was about to
political
say, yeah.
statements and whatnot. And I do know that there's some people, which I'll be honest, I didn't come to this conclusion by myself, but in sort of as I've grown to know the movie, and I've done my own little bit of research on the movie as well, there are a lot of people that said it's staunchly conservative, that
I've
it's a
heard
very
that too. Yeah.
conservative film,
Yeah.
which
Totally.
I never really thought of, because I'm a very liberal person, not conservative. And so
Hmm.
it's sort of, it's not that it rubs me the wrong way, but it's not the forefront of my interpretation of the character or the film. But you could say that the way that, with his values and the way that he approaches things, maybe that's very different than the protesting Black Panther Party, sort of, what Jenny is, the hippie that
Hmm.
Jenny
Yeah,
was at the
exactly.
other end of the spectrum. But I don't know, when I think about conservative ideals at the same time, I don't know that is, you could really define Forrest Gump in that, in those
Yeah.
terms.
The thing is, because for me, is Forrest Gump doesn't seem like his character is so, he's neither left or
No.
right.
No.
his character couldn't be, because that's what the idea is, that like say Tom Hanks's character is the conservative with the a all American football player,
Yeah,
war hero, all of that.
sure.
You would assume, and he's from he's from Red State, Alabama, and he financially
Right.
successful. He achieves his fame. He
Hmm.
lives in this giant house where he has he has a black maid. I guess that's kind of a part of it too. But like
Hmm.
his character is
Yeah.
it's not it isn't.
It's
I
not
guess
defined along those lines,
yeah, it
and
doesn't
it's not
exactly.
your stereotypical like, yes, he was a war hero, but he wasn't for war. Like, he didn't support
Well, he's
like
completely
he
neutral. Yeah, exactly. Like when he's doing the protesting, he's just like, all right, I'll like, yeah, whatever they want me to do, I'll do. Yeah, exact. But
yeah.
no, you can continue what you're saying. Sorry.
Well, no, I think that even I kind of discovered, or I saw, and I don't know how accurate this is. Maybe you can back me up on this, but it was the quote of what he was actually saying into the microphone with Abby Hoffman at the Capitol. Like, when you remember when they forced him in front of the mic,
Yeah.
and Abby Hoffman, the Abby Hoffman character was like, "Tell us about the war, man,"
Hmm.
and then the other army dude comes in and sabotages and pulls all the cables out. But apparently, he did have a script that he said, and it was something to the effect of, in Vietnam, sometime, like, when you go, sometimes you come back home to your mama without legs, and sometimes you don't come home at all, and that's all I have to say about that. And like,
Yeah.
that was like it. So it was kind of like a reference to Lieutenant Dan and a reference to Bubba, sort of,
Hmm.
and that's all he had to say about that. And then you don't even get to hear that, really. And then Abby Hoffman comes in and said, "Right on, brother. You said it all." It's just
Yeah.
yeah, it's but yeah, again, so it'd be hard to say that it's a very conservative film. Like, I also
Yeah.
choose not to think about it in those terms. It's just a good movie from my perspective, and
No,
I'd
you're right about that.
rather not contained it with by trying to
Yeah, you shouldn't try.
label it,
You should never try and get politics into these types of films.
unless it's a political movie. I mean, like, and I just don't think that
There's parts of it that are political, but not.
for sure,
Yeah,
for sure
that's not
it
the
is.
point of the film, though. That's not the theme of the film. It's not.
No,
It's
no, I don't think so. I don't think it's necessarily trying to make a big statement, but I
no.
don't know.
I
You could
doubt
debate
Robert
that for a long
Zemeckis
time.
or the writers or the director had that intention. You know,
Hmm.
another thing is like because what I would assume is most people in Hollywood are liberal for that matter, and
Hmm.
I would
Hmm.
assume that maybe Robert Zemeckis maybe. I've never heard anything saying that he's conservative, but that might not even be the point. But it could be
Hmm.
the writer itself. But I don't think,
Hmm.
no, I don't think it has anything to do with that. But I understand where people can see it from that perspective. But
Yeah.
I don't know. I don't think so. I
Yeah.
think
Fair
it's
enough.
yeah,
I'm
um,
with you.
yeah, totally. Another thing that I noticed about the film when I was watching is like there's a for the most part Forrest Gump has a very happy life. He has he's wealthy. He's like with he's successful in the war, obviously with the he gets the Medal of Honor.
Hmm.
um he's on the he goes to China to compete for in ping pong.
I know.
He has a successful shrimping boat business, but he loses three very very important people in his life.
Mm.
Bubba, um,
His mom.
his
Yeah.
mom, and Jenny, which
Hmm.
is it. But I think those three characters, and those are kind of maybe not. I think they're kind of the three acts of the film. That's each death kind of begins a new act. He goes at
Hmm.
right after college. He goes into the war, and then
Hmm.
Bubba dies, and then after all of the ping pong and
Hmm.
shrimping, his mother dies, and then at the very
Yeah.
end, his right at the very
Yeah.
end, Jenny dies, and that kind of develops a story too with the three important deaths
Hmm.
to Forrest Gump's character.
Yeah. It's funny. It's easy to lose sight of the all the loss, all the death, like when there's so much, it's broken up by so much hilarity and
Hmm.
like unexpected turns and fun nostalgia that it's easy to sort of forget that. But in that sense, it is a sad tale in some ways. He loses the three most important people to him in his life all die at some
Yeah.
point during the movie. So yeah, it's tough. I know that last scene where he's choking up over Jenny's grave is always
Hmm.
gets me. It always gets me. Just seeing
Yeah.
just the acting and like the way he crunches up his mouth and he's trying to stop himself from
Yeah.
from from crying. It's just it's powerful.
Yeah.
And oh man, you just know by that point of the film, you just know how much he loves Jenny and how
Yeah.
just how that must have rocked him. But
Yeah.
especially after finally getting her, finally marrying her. And anyway, but
Yeah. It's totally you were saying along the lines of how get caught up of the idea of kind of missing these important deaths because of the hilarity. And I think a big part of that, which I don't know if you agree with me with this, but what I really find what I noticed when I was watching is it's very, very like quirky is not the right word to say, but there's like the timing and comedic timing is such an important part of this. And I think,
mhm.
there's just these quotes after another that are um that he just says out of nowhere, and the accents are so strong, and there's people always having these like one liners all the time and meeting new people. He's getting into these ridiculous situations. He's like, and something came up and bit me, and then he's like, something bit me, like that. Like that's like, that he states the line. He's like, what happened? He's like, something came up and bit me, and then he like says it himself in the film. It's like
Right.
that timing and the way it's executed
Oh
is
yeah.
it makes it so much better. And I've that's one of the only films I've seen like that. I think it's
Well, I wonder if that was one of the reasons behind the casting of Tom Hanks in that role. Like when we talked about it before about how he was known as a comedic actor primarily before Philadelphia, and then in Philadelphia there's really nothing comedic about it. Very dramatic.
mhm,
And so maybe that was part of it. It's just like we've got a character here. This is technically a drama, but it's very comedic as well, and we
mhm.
need an actor with that comedic timing and that
That's so true. Yeah.
I don't know. Maybe that was the big motivation for Tom Hanks because there was such a strong comedic element to the film, and who we know that Tom Hanks can pull it off. I mean, geez, he's the expert, right?
Yeah, definitely. Um,
Yeah.
there's another controversy that I find really interesting. So
Hmm.
we can discuss this because it's pretty debatable, and there's a big debate behind it. But so Forrest Gump won Best Picture at the Oscars, and that was 1994 was a huge year for movies. The
Hmm.
Lion King came out,
Okay.
Shawshank
Oh
Redemption,
yeah. Yeah.
Pulp Fiction. So
Wow. Yeah.
so Forrest Gump won Best Picture, but people were pretty upset, maybe not at the time, but a lot after,
Hmm.
about if Shawshank should have won or Pulp Fiction. So do you
Hmm.
think Forrest Gump deserves the Best Picture win, or do you think Shawshank or
Oh, what a great question.
or
Pulp
Pulp
Fiction.
Fiction win? Yeah.
Okay. That's a really good question, Ryan. And obviously I've seen all those, like I've seen Shawshank and Pulp Fiction many times, and I'm a big Quentin Tarantino fan. Obviously even before Pulp Fiction, I'd seen Reservoir Dogs, and like I sort of um, I think that Pulp Fiction was uh, really special, right? From a filmmaking perspective,
Mhm.
it was an important one. Do I, on the whole, as a movie, like it really depends on sort of, I guess, how we define Best Picture. Shawshank has to be up there in the sense that it's also one of those kind of epic movies that kind of goes through multiple sort of
Yeah,
chapters and like
100%.
different time periods and whatnot. And the acting is like so strong, and of course even today, like Morgan Freeman's narration is like just Morgan Freeman's narration is a narration voice is a cultural icon, right? So
Yeah,
it's a pop icon. So
totally.
and it all really stems well from Shawshank Redemption. But I have to say that in terms of, I think that what in terms of what I would define as best picture, like for me, it needs to hit a variety of different emotions, take me on take me on a ride, and kind of leave me wanting more at the end.
Hmm.
But also feeling like there's closure, but you don't mind watching it 5 times in the theater. Let's put it that way. So
Yeah.
I would have a hard time making a case for Shawshank or Pulp Fiction, given the fact that it was Forrest Gump that I went back to the theater 4 more times to watch.
Yeah, that's true.
Um, so I don't know, like how do you define, I don't know, what are the criteria that you use to define best picture? And I don't actually know for that matter, does the Academy have a playbook? They're like, oh, well, it's this, it's you have to have, or is it just feel? Is it just opinion?
I don't know. Well, there's so many people in a part of the academy that, vote and judge what movie deserves best picture. And, it also, I feel, it seems Forrest Gump seems like the type of film to win best picture too. It's got that historical element to it that is like that's always going to boost you up to win best picture. If you look in history, half the movies that win are all history pieces or period pieces. So, uh,
Yeah.
and so I think, but it's a little different because, it's set only like based in like the last portion of the film is set in 1982.
Mm,
That's only like say like it's only 12 years before when the film came out, so you can't really describe it
mm,
as a history film or define. Obviously it is, but
mhm.
you can't define it that way. But it's uh it's a tough decision, man. Like I don't know. It's hard to describe which way how they would do it because it is they're great movies.
They really are.
They've all affected me like
Yeah.
incredibly.
But if you
Obviously, yeah.
had you asked me in 1994 though, what do you think is the best like it's or well I guess it would have been the February 95 or whatever when the Oscars were held, but what do you think out of those three? Then I would have said Forrest Gump, yeah, because of the impact that it had on me and because how much it got. Like I said, I bought the book, I read the original book, I bought the soundtrack, I listened to it all the time in my car, and I gave the movie theater more money than I probably ever given. Maybe again, Titanic's up there too,
Yeah.
but it's kind of like, yeah, I don't know. I think I would have a hard time defend or saying that, oh no, but yeah, Shawshank would be the best picture though. Like I don't have the I don't
Yeah.
know. It resonated with me too much, Forrest Gump,
Hmm.
to to give the other two serious thought. But without taking anything away from the fact that those are incredible films.
Yeah, yeah. I know. They're almost flawless. Like I think, you know, I look at Pulp Fiction and I see a near flawless film. It's pretty incredible. There's not one scene where I'm not on the edge of my seat, and that's the difference between, you know, Pulp Fiction is this gritty crime movie that's
Hmm.
doing this non-linear storytelling that's very, very script developed, like it's script driven instead of
Hmm.
say plot driven or uh,
Hmm.
it's very and that's what I love so much about Pulp Fiction is also that it's got that Quentin Tarantino feel to it. Whereas Shawshank Redemption,
Yeah.
yeah, it's like this. It's a story and it's a lot more. It's a lot more dark, I think, than Forrest Gump too. And I'm a fan of those types of movies. I
Mm.
think that's a movie that's really, really character development based too. It's where you see Andy Dufresne go
Hmm.
through so much, uh, a very, very different lifestyle, and same with Morgan Freeman's character. He's changing completely,
Mm.
and you see that and then also the ending of Shawshank Redemption
Oh, it's
is
the best.
it's the best. It'll
See
captivate you.
what's an a.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's amazing, and that I think Shawshank probably is the best ending out of all the three. Oh man,
Yeah.
oh it's
Yeah.
tough. It's tough. I don't know, man, because
It
obviously
is.
I think Pulp Fiction's got that awesome ending too, where they're walking in with the guns and they put them in the shorts and listening to that
Ah,
like that Hawaiian or that surf music too at the end. It's
yeah.
great. But
It's it's tough. But you know, Pulp Fiction has, or Quentin Tarantino has a way of keeping you. His movies, you're kind of like you're sort of bracing, you're waiting for something like to happen the whole time, and very often they do, and it's violent and it's crazy, but you know it's coming, and so you're kind of, it's like the drinking the milk scene in Inglorious Bastards, when, you know, what's his name, the German actor,
Christoph Waltz.
well, it's Christoph Waltz, is like, he's so eloquent and polite, but you just know he's a Nazi, and you just know like stuff's gonna go down here. You're just waiting
Mhm.
for it to happen, and so he, you know, Quentin Tarantino has a way of keeping you on the edge of your seat,
Yeah.
you know, throughout the movie, and I think there's an element of that that isn't there in Shawshank Redemption, or Forrest Gump for that matter.
Yeah.
You're not bracing yourself waiting for like something just crazy to happen.
Yeah.
So, which you constantly are
Yeah.
with Quentin Tarantino films. But
Yeah.
yeah, it's an
We definitely got to do a Pulp Fiction and a Shawshank Redemption podcast though.
oh yeah,
That
they're
that
worthy for sure.
100%. Yeah. Yeah. I think now it is time for some just final fun facts about this movie.
Sure, yeah.
Yeah, so Tom Hanks was not paid for this film at all. So instead, he took percentage points, which ultimately uh, gave him. He eventually finished with $40 million.
Not too
As his Yeah,
bad,
not too bad at all. Not too bad at
especially
all.
for 1994. Like that's probably more than double what the highest paid actor. I think there's somewhere maybe
Oh, are
getting
you kidding me? Yeah.
20 million, like but yeah, it's that's crazy number. It's kind of like George Lucas's approach. Didn't George Lucas also take a similar approach? He took
Yeah,
to
he did.
finance it. He's like, just give me points, like give me
A lot of actors
back
do that.
end,
Yeah,
right?
it
So
was. I know. Yeah, Keanu Reeves also did that for The Matrix, and that movie
oh yeah,
blew up. So
yeah,
yeah, and
smart guys. That's
yeah,
cool.
yeah. The
Good.
line "My name is Forrest Gump. People call me Forrest Gump" was ad libbed by Tom Hanks while filming the scene, and Robert Zemeckis liked it so much that he just decided to keep it in.
Isn't that great? I love it.
Yeah,
I love those
yeah.
things. That's really cool.
And when Forrest first learned to play ping pong in the infirmary, he was told the trick is to keep his eye on the ball by another soldier. And if you, I mean, obviously you've watched this film a ton of times, and I don't know, you've probably noticed this, but after that, if you'll never see him blink. There's not a single time when he's playing ping pong that he blinks. Not a
Yeah, yeah.
single time.
That's an interesting one, Ryan. I'm gonna have to go. Why I hadn't noticed that before. I do remember when he held the ball in front and he was moving the ball back and forth, and like right after he said, "You got to keep your eye on the ball," and you
Hmm.
just saw his eyeballs tracking it and tracking it. Next thing you
Hmm.
know, but yeah, I never realized that he didn't blink again for the rest of the movie when he was playing ping pong. That's pretty
Yeah,
great.
and then yeah, another thing, the ping pong balls that they're using are completely CGI too. They're just like when he's just faking it, and then they have the noise added in when he's like doing it too. There's like a couple, obviously like the first scene where he's just like easily playing, but like when he's all doing like like back and forth like crazy is all it's all CGI that. But I mean,
Right.
yeah, I
That's
bet
so
you
good.
it's awesome. Yeah, definitely. Yeah, and so there's an attention to detail thing too. Yeah. As you said before with the Frank Wills, he's the actual guard on duty during that night, and
Okay. Yeah.
um he was the person who discovered the break-in, and he was the one he called when they're talking on the phone. um
I think that's really cool, and I think that one of the if one of the other little details that I kind of discovered when I was doing a little bit of my own research was um, the the scene in Vietnam during the ambush,
Hmm.
it's interesting because they indicated that like the enemy, and you might remember this, but the enemy is never seen. All of a sudden, the rain stops, the sun comes out, and next thing you know, a bullet goes flying by, and one of the
Yeah.
guys is taken out, and it's on. But you never actually see the Viet Cong. You never see the enemy throughout the whole thing, and
Yeah.
it led a
Oh yeah.
number it led a number of Vietnam veterans to kind of rate this as one of the more accurate combat scenes in movie history, because they say that it's always very sudden. Usually the enemy isn't seen and it happens really quickly. So
Yeah.
like I thought that was like, you wouldn't necessarily think of Forrest Gump when you think about the rich history of war movies. You wouldn't think of Forrest
Yeah.
Gump being the one to have that big feather in its cap as having one of the more realistic battle scenes, you know?
Yeah. Another interesting thing when Lieutenant Dan first meets Forrest and Bubba in Vietnam, he says, "You must be my FNGs," and I always thought that was like some um term in the army that they use, like for I
Right.
don't know. I thought it was something, but it stands for effing new guys,
Yeah.
and I
Yeah.
had no
It's funny.
idea.
I didn't know. Well, I had read, it's funny. I read a book within the past year, it was a military based book. And I had first heard of that acronym FNG, but I'd forgotten him until I rewatched the film and I heard him that you must be my FNGs. I never picked up on that prior. Like what I thought the same thing. Oh, it's some military acronym
Yeah.
yeah, that's great.
Yeah, and another cool thing, Kurt Russell did the voice of Elvis Presley
Oh
when
yeah.
in the film, which is it's pretty cool too. And he even played Elvis in a film directed by John Carpenter in 1979.
How
Only
about
two.
that? How
Yeah.
about that? Eh? Yeah, I didn't actually know Kurt Russell had anything to do with this film, which is I was just talking about him because I rewatched the movie Deepwater Horizon and I was
Yeah.
talking about how good his role was in that. He's
Hmm.
pretty solid.
Yeah. Um, David Allen Greer, Ice Cube, and Dave Chappelle turned down the role for Bubba. So Ice Cube refused to play an idiot. That was the reason he refused to play the role. And Dave
Yeah.
Chappelle thought the movie would bomb. And so yeah, and I don't know about David Allen Greer, but it's pretty fun. That's ridiculous. Ice Cube as Bubba. That'd be pretty funny. That'd
That's
be
hard to imagine. Like I'm trying to think of like the arc of Dave Chappelle's career, but in 1990, whenever they shot this in
yeah.
93 or whatever, 92, like that he was in a position to turn down a movie because like I don't know. That amazes me. But to picture Dave Chappelle in that role,
Pretty
oh my
funny.
gosh, that's
Yeah.
so
I
great.
could see it. I could see it. I could see Dave Chappelle as Bubba.
He
I
could
could
probably pull it off. I mean, the guy's a
yeah.
genius,
Yeah.
but I don't know. And it's funny because I thought about this when I was watching the opening credits of the movie, and you're like, okay, Tom Hanks, Gary Sinise, Robin Wright. You're like, these are very well established and famous actors.
Hmm.
And then Bubba's, and you have to forgive me, I can't remember his name. That's kind of my point, is that his name came up and I'm like, who's that? I'm like, I don't recognize that name. And so when the movie was done, I waited for the credits to roll, and the cast credits don't come until way later. Anyway, and sure enough, that was Bubba. And
Yeah.
I don't think, and correct me if I'm wrong, I don't think I've ever seen Bubba in
I have
anything
not. No, I have
else.
not. I haven't either. No.
So you
Yeah.
have to wonder like what it was like for him, like when they were shooting the scenes together. Had Tom Hanks already won his Oscar for Philadelphia, and
Yeah.
like what must that have been like for this, what we would consider a no-name actor, to have so many side scenes with Tom Hanks? And
Hmm.
yeah, I think
Yeah,
he did a great
totally.
job. This
Yeah.
the shrimp stuff is great when he's going on and on about the different kinds of shrimp, and then at the very end,
Yeah.
he's like grilled shrimp, yeah, that's about it. And then
Yeah.
they look at each other and they just keep scrubbing with the
Yeah.
toothbrush. It's
Yeah.
like
That's
you
hilarious.
did a great job. Yeah.
I bet you can't guess else who auditioned for the role of Bubba was Tupac Shakur.
Tupac?
Yeah.
Oh my gosh. No, I did not know that.
Yeah.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
That's amazing because
Yeah.
yeah, because like none of these guys, maybe it's because you're so used to the character, but Bubba was a big dude. At least that's how he comes across. It's difficult for me to picture even Tupac, but like Dave Chappelle in that role, and yeah, it's so interesting. Right.
Yeah.
Mm.
Almost and this one like kind of I thought this was so interesting was almost all of John Lennon's dialogue from the song Imagine is in the film. So when he's
Yeah.
talking, they use, no possession,
What?
no
No
religion
possession? No
too.
religion?
It's easy
Yeah.
if you try.
Well, it's easy if you
That's
try.
yeah.
Yeah. I know I clued into that as well. Like it's basically the song, but it's kind of in some ways giving for it like the movie gives Forrest credit for a lot of stuff. And I guess that was the movie giving credit for the lyrics to Imagine, like right,
Yeah.
which is pretty great. And so many of those characters, and in addition to the people that he lost, it's like, oh yeah, a few years later, somebody decided that he shouldn't be. Anyways, then he ends up getting shot, and that there's like many people that he meets that have
Well,
a
yeah, yeah,
untimely end.
he describes famous people as just like, oh, this nice man. He's like, oh yeah, that nice man I met at the White
Yeah.
House was shot not that long after. And
Yeah, and
he
then his
doesn't.
brother was
Yeah,
killed, was shot in a hotel kitchen. It must be tough being
exactly.
brothers, you know. Yeah,
Yeah,
so
totally. Yeah, but I think that pretty much sums it up. We've been here for a while talking about Forrest Gump. It's been a lot of fun.
uh, yeah, it has been. Thanks a lot, Ryan.
No problem.
It's been fun to peel back the layers and revisit a movie that meant so much to me
Yeah, totally.
for so long. I hadn't. It was fun to revisit. As I said, it had been a few years since I'd actually sat down and really watched it, and I'm gonna have to look up the rating or at least figure out what age I'll be able to get my girls in
Yeah.
front and watch that movie because I want them to experience the some of the stuff that
Yeah,
was so important to
totally
me.
appreciate it. Yeah, that you want them to appreciate it just as much as you did as when you were their age or and at that perfect age. Yeah, I mean, I know you were 17, I guess, or 18. I'm not sure when you saw it, but
Mm-hmm.
like I remember seeing it when I was probably like 10,
Mm-hmm.
8 or 10 or 9, something like
Okay.
that when I saw it, and I just I had never seen anything like it before, and I was so fascinated. The dialogue was so different from when me watching, say, Marvel movies all the time and all those action Star Wars movies, and it's just such a different film and so iconic,
Well,
and it changed my perspective on film
I
forever. I think, yeah,
I think that's well said. And I give you credit for the fact that, sometimes I talk to people and they'll say, oh, have you seen this? Like, oh, it came out before I was born. I'm like, geez, if I only watched movies that came out after 1977, I'd be missing a pretty big swath of
oh,
good stuff.
100%, yeah.
So good for you for searching. I mean, obviously you're passionate about film, but good for you for searching these things out. And it's also a
Hmm.
testament that I mean, I wasn't around for most of the stuff that was referenced in that film, and you obviously don't need to be to appreciate it. It's
Oh
still
no, totally,
just a
yeah.
great story, right?
Exactly. Yeah, it is such an iconic film. All of my friends, even the friends that watch like a movie a month, will
Mm-hmm.
they've seen this and they know the lines. They love Forrest Gump. They'll always say, "Oh, I love that movie. That's such a great movie."
That's
And
good.
and
That's
I'm happy that they appreciate this movie really well too. And but yeah, it's really good.
Yeah, it's
It's a
nice to know that kids your age, well, you're basically my age when I first saw it, so it's nice to know that it has that kind of staying power and it's
mhm.
as relevant to you guys as it was to me.
Oh, 100%. Yeah, totally.
Mhm.
All right. So, yeah, thanks for joining me, Robbie. We definitely have to come on again for another episode. We could talk about Pulp Fiction and Shawshank and
Pulp Fiction, Shawshank, Driven, anything you want to talk about. Yeah.
yeah,
So, but yeah,
totally.
it was a pleasure, Ryan. Thanks a
Yeah.
lot for having me on.
All right. Yeah. All right, guys. Make sure to follow on Spotify and Amazon Music. Check out my Instagram at There Will Be Movie Reviews. And make sure, yeah, you can download these movies, share them with your friends, tell everyone, your family. But yeah, thanks for tuning in, guys. Can't wait to have you get somebody have you guys listen in next weekend. That'll be a lot of fun. So, all right, thank you, Robbie.
Yeah. Thanks again.